Hello, welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Goldscythe. I read out loud fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today I will continue reading the Silmarillion fic by Aeolian Suns from Archive of Our Own called The Rescue Party, Chapter 9. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. On with the show. The Rescue Party by Aeolian Sands, Chapter 9, The Deep, Part 2. Osse waited on the boat. He realized that his moments in this life, or at least in this particular fauna, might very well be numbered. Lifting his head, he gazed across the waves to gaze upon the gathering storm that was definitely not conjured up by his own powers. Hellfire and brimstone. Rising to his feet, he called to the clouds gathering in the east. "Uinen," he cried, "my love, this is not what you think." Clunk! Something slammed straight into his chest, knocking him clear from the boat and into the waters, which were now filled with choppy white caps. A dark cloud cover fell upon the little rowboat unnaturally fast. Osse found himself tumbling in the waves. A pair of lithe but strong arms latched around his chest. Twisting, he tugged at them before quickly giving up. He went for the elbow punch instead. Slamming his elbow back, he met with his wife's sternum, and she reflexively let go of him. The waves crested higher now. Osse growled and added his own fury to the storm. It had been a long while since he had last had a good wrestling match. And if Uinen was showing some spirit, then, well, calling a wave to his hand, he sent it surging forward, but a tall, willowy Meyer with long dark hair leapt halfway out of the water and threw her pale arms out, breaking the wave before it reached her. "Come now, afraid of little water," Osse laughed, as he called the waves to him again, and sang a few words to the wind. Because while in general one shouldn't dig a hole he was in any deeper, if the Maya in the hole was already as good as dead, then why not have some fun with his lovely wife? Did I ever tell you how beautiful you look when you're angry? Uinen scrawled and called great vines of ocean weeds to wrap around her arms. "Pray tell, why did I hear an elf's voice singing from the deep? Why are you sitting here in a small boat?" she asked, water streaming off her face as her silvery blue eyes cut into her husband's own. But before Osse could answer, Uinen set a deluge of twisting vines whipping across the water. Osse leapt in a great arc, flying over the vines and tackling his wife, who fell backwards into the water. But the Lady of the Seas was not so easily defeated. They rolled in the waters, Uinen wrapping her strong legs around her husband's and arresting any attempt to kick her. But she had not yet pinned his arms, and Osse smiled malevolently as they rolled in the waves because his wife was quite ticklish. But before he could strike, a cry echoed through the waters. "Osse! End your spell on us! Ara is—" And the rest of the message was muffled as Uinen sent her vines wrapping around Osse's torso in a binding embrace. "Uinen!" he called, as a kelp strand threatened to wrap itself around his mouth. "The Noldor king is hurt!" At once Uinen stilled. Osse felt himself sinking since he was now wrapped as tightly as a package of lembas bread. Thankfully, Uinen had the thought to grab him before he sank too far. "What have you done?" she hissed, but Osse paid her no heed as he sang a few mumbled words, calling Eärwen and Finarfin back to the surface. Uinen kept staring at him, and Osse struggled up against the vines. "Well, I just wanted to protect Amon. Fëanor and Nolofinue were tearing it to pieces with their antics. I was sending them back to where they belong." Uinen slapped him. "Did Eru give the elves gills? Fins? If they belong in Beleriand, why are they on the bottom of the ocean?" Osse put on his most charming smile, the one Uinen loved so much. But before he could charm his way out of the mass of seaweed, A head appeared. Edwin swam with difficulty, one arm looped around an unconscious golden-haired elf, and the other expertly treading water. "Help!" she called as she fought the waves, trying in vain to keep her husband's head above water. At once, Uinen let Ossa go and calmed the storm so that the water was smooth as glass. Ossa plummeted into the depths with his prison of seaweed. A few moments earlier, as Anaire and Nerdanel descended through the waters guided by Ossa's power, they watched in growing anticipation as the waters around them changed from turquoise to dark blue to black. The Fenrir lamp cast a blue light all about them, and did a surprisingly decent job at giving them light enough to see by. They touched down gently at the edge of the underwater cliff that marked the rim of the great subsea canyon. They stood silently for a moment, when suddenly there was a great roaring noise. Amanda whirled her head to see the largest snake she had ever seen. Wreathed in blue lightning, the beast was charging down the canyon at a steady pace. As it passed beneath them in a churning fury, she saw something most unsettling: their husbands. Fingolfin held a sword that was embedded in the creature's back, and with his other hand he dragged Fëanor by the wrist. The eel and its unwanted passengers passed them by before turning left and launching down into what appeared to be a great cave cut into the canyon walls. "Well," Anada began, "I did not know what I was expecting, but—" "They certainly continue to exceed expectations," Nerdanel finished. "They remind me of that kitten that Aragana raised. The orange one. Poor thing thought it could bring down an eagle of Manwë by jumping on its leg." Nerdanel nodded. "At least the kitten had sense enough to let go." "But the eagle wasn't electric. I think if Noah could have let go, he would have." Another's face blanched a little. "What do you propose we do?" Mathon's daughter smiled. "We go fishing, of course." "Last time I went fishing for a man, I caught Nolo, who I clearly should have thrown back." "Not men. We will catch the eel." Another raised her eyebrows. "We will?" "Well, the creature was attracted to Nolo and Naro somehow. I believe it was the glow that drew the eel to them like moth to flame." Nerdanel stalked along the canyon rim, walking south towards where the eel had disappeared. Another followed. "You don't think it was their stupidity that lured it out of hiding?" Nerdanel grinned. "I should hope not. For while we have a light to help us, we have no more men to spare." "The lantern?" "Yes. Why not send the lantern down the cliff a ways?" Nerdanel asked, stopping to tug some long kelp strands out by the roots. "Here, help me tie these together." Another compelled, and before long they had a long seaweed rope. Nerdanel attached the lantern at the end. She then walked to the edge of the cliff, eyeing the dark opening at the base of the opposite cliff face across the canyon floor. Nerdanel hesitated a moment. "One of us should go down there first, just in case Nara and Noah managed to leap off once it's settled in the cave." Another looked over the edge of the cliff and frowned. "You were always the one touring the mines. I would prefer to make my chances up here." Nathaniel smiled and grabbed some more vines, quickly but efficiently creating another rope. She tied one end of it to her waist and gave the other to Anaira. "You can help lower me down. Once I am at the bottom, you can begin to send the lantern down." The dark-haired Eleth bit her lip. "I really hope you thought this through." "Of course," Nathaniel replied with a wink. "I'm my husband, but this isn't an emergency situation." Anaira wasn't comforted much by that statement, but she took a good firm hold of the seaweed rope all the same. Nerdanil leaned a bit over the edge, testing her weight against the vine's strength. Confident that it would hold, she gave her sister-in-law a nod and promptly walked off the edge. Anara swore and leveraged the vine against a nearby boulder to make supporting her friend's weight easier. Fingolfin barely felt his body hit the floor of the cave. All he knew was that the eel had stopped swimming, and that the electric current that had flowed through him had finally stopped. His locking muscles released, and he fell to the floor unfeeling. Nerdanel ignored the pain of the vine digging into her waist as she quickly descended the cliff face. It perhaps would have been better to find a way to ask Osa to lend his power again and give her a slow fall through the water, but Nerdanel was no fool. She knew that by now Osa was likely attempting to explain his involvement in this disaster. Not that she pitied him. The Maya deserved it for making an already impossible mess 100 times worse. Still, it meant he was likely a little preoccupied right now, so descent by vines it was. When she at last reached the canyon floor, she noticed just how dark it was in the depths. Far above her, Anaire and the lamp were a single star of illumination. Crouching in the long shadows, she crossed the canyon to the cliff where the great eel had disappeared. Peering around the corner of the entrance, she saw that the snake was laying on the ground, twisting in on itself to reach the sword with its great jaws. Fëanor and Fingolfin were laying motionless on the cave floor, imitating useless sacks of clay. The eel let loose a great snarl and tugged at the sword, ripping it out of its scales with a screeching noise. Not good. The beast flung the sword with a great swing of its head and shattered against the wall. Then it turned to look at the worthless but glowing husbands on the ground. "Anaire!" Nerdanel screamed as she unsheathed the great sword from her back. She looked behind her to see the lamp hanging about a quarter way down the cliff face, but suddenly it fell several dozen meters to be near level to the ceiling of the cave before jerking to a stop. Then it began to swing back and forth in great arcs like a pendulum. Nerdanel smirked at her friend's quick thinking. At once a soft glow filled the cave, and the beast turned its attention from the unconscious elves, annoyed at the sudden light. But while this light diminished as the lamp swung to the height of its arc, it returned to rise and fall again, and again to match the repetitive cycles of the swinging lamp. A great roar sounded as the creature reacted to the flickering disruption of its usual darkness. Coils of electricity flared again across its body, and it charged. Nerdanel dropped like a stone, and the water rushed through her red hair when the electric serpent raced over her head, out of the cave entrance, and pounced on the annoying light on a string. Nerdanel did not waste a second. She sheathed her sword and ran to her husband. "Fëanor!" she hissed, kicking him in the ribs. "If you wanted to sleep, you would have just stayed dead and saved me the trouble of dragging your hide out of Edo knows what forsaken place this is." Anare tried first to hold the lantern up the canyon walls, but it was pointless. The great teeth of the beast below had snapped the vines as soon as it attempted to swallow the light. It was still below her now, thrashing its head as it sought to break the stone core of the lamp in its jaws. There was no time to think, no time to plan. Already she hated herself for this, but then again, she was the wife of Fingolfin after all. It was this thought that prompted the ghost of a smile across her lips as she drew both her swords, their twin blades cutting through water. Then Anare let loose a war scream and leapt off the cliff. A yell tearing through his very fea jolted Fingolfin from unconsciousness, cutting through him faster than any bolt of electric lightning. Opening his eyes, he stumbled to his feet. What was Nerdanel standing there? The red head stood before him like the queen of the night, her red hair alight about her in the waters. But it was not Nerdanel who had screamed. Ignoring the pain of the Ra, Fingolfin sprinted past his sister-in-law to the cave entrance just in time to see his wife leaping onto the water snake, twin swords piercing its head right behind the eyes. The primal beast screeched and the cliffs echoed its death cry. Anare fell from his thrashing head, rolling from the momentum of her dive on the canyon floor. Fingolfin prayed to Ulmo with the last of the strength he would soften her fall. Ulmo, as it were, was in the tributaries of the great Gelion, attempting to purge it from the poisons of Bragolach and the black blood that still flowed into it. Here in the far east the dragon had come spitting fire, scorching the earth. Even the renewing rains only brought ash and debris into the waters, polluting them all the more. He was trying his hardest to tune out the world and set to his task. If no other of his order cared to maintain the eastern lands, at least he would be there to do his duty unto Arda. But the sea kept calling to him, loudly. He had tried shutting his mind to it, and to the cries of his servants in the waters, but it was building to a blaring crescendo. What? He growled, opening his mind a fraction. He wished he never did. By Ero, all he wanted was a day or two to mend the waters of the land. Ulmo could not believe the images that were assaulting him. Osse and Uinen attempting to rip out each other's hair, the Noldor High King half dead in his wife's arms, and for some inexplicable reason Fëanor and Nolofinwe in the deep battling primordial eels. In frustration, Ulmo surged from the river waters. By the flame imperishable! Was he the only competent one in all of creation? Why in a holy order must he do everything himself? Was it that hard for Mundus to keep the dead confined? How difficult it was to simply not let elves breathe underwater? Ulmo flung his arms out in frustration, the waterfalls of his fauna splattering the ground. Something neighed. Ulmo, my lord! An elven voice shouted from below. Butting his lip to keep from cursing, the Vala looked down to see an elf with long dark hair on horseback, his arm in a sling, fighting to keep his terrified mount under control. Karantir. Groaning, Ulmo allowed his fauna to shift to a fair form so that he would not tower over the elf, electing to go for his preferred mannish style with a long white beard and hair. Once the change was complete, he eyed the elf before him. What are you doing out here alone? Where are your people? Ulmo asked him. Karantir glowered. The majority of them are in Mundus. Turns out even dwarven swords are a little use when the enemy outnumbers you 30 to 1. Yet you survived. Thanks to the foolishness of my captain, who took an axe in the back for me. His stupidity can be only rivaled by that of my dear adviser, Mahtalanwe, who used his body as a shield. Karantir replied bitterly. Then in a softer voice he added, I did not wish them to die for me. Ulmo stared into his grey eyes. But they did die for you, and now you run away alone. What remains of my host has joined with Kurvo and Tuelka's people. They will settle in Nargothrond with Vindarato, but I refuse to go west. Where will you go then? To Himring? No. I am done with the fighting and the politics and the world at large. Mahdrus's heart burns still, but mine is freezing over, and I have had enough. I will spend my days with Delva in the wild unless the oath tears me from my rest. It's over now, Ulmo. It was always over, son of Fëanor. Did you not hear Mundus? But enough. Something unsettling has happened, and you are the perfect candidate to take care of it. Take care of what? Don't bother to go to Estelad. Instead, journey all the way to the coast. A party from the west will await you there. You are to be their guide. Karantir scoffed. You are forgetting that I am not liked by those in the west. I'd say despised would be the most appropriate word. I am not, but I have faith in your diplomatic abilities. Moreover, Morifinwe, you are not as dead in fear as you claim, and this little side quest will give you a reason to dismiss the questioning glances of your cousins and brothers. Hiding behind an errand of Vala is far better refuge than what Delfinwe can offer you. The elf huffed. I could do without your prying eyes, but I know when a fair bargain is to be had. So be it. I will guide your precious western party if my lord likewise does me a favor. Ulmo smiled and walked closer to hear the elf's demand. He nodded his assent, for his was by far the easier task. But first, he had to make sure there was a party for Karantir to guide. Quickly shifting forms, he raced to the sea. The sight that greeted Ulmo's eyes would have been comical. From on high, he saw Uinen and an older queen tending to Finarfin in a little rowboat, the former using her powers to heal what appeared to be stinging wounds. But under the waves, the evidence of disaster were even more profound. As Ulmo propelled himself downward, he saw Osse wrapped in seaweed laying on a seafloor staring upwards in contemplation. Osse, Ulmo addressed him. Osse continued staring up at nothing. Osse, Ulmo addressed again. Ulmo, Osse replied at last, making no move to free himself. I was hoping you wouldn't be able to see me. Ulmo raised a watery hand to his forehead. Where are the other elves? The canyon. You will probably need to help them sooner rather than later. Ulmo glided to the canyon and saw a great electric eel laying dead, twin swords sticking out of its head. Near its body lay an Eleth with dark hair, dressed in blue. Thankfully, he could see that she breathed still. Then he heard the sound of a woman cursing. Ulmo groaned and switched back to his fair form. Stop twitching! I'm trying to help you! Ulmo stalked over to the cave to see Nerdanel crouched over two very recognizable former kings. By the very evident drag marks in the sand, one of them looked to have attempted to make a run for it, but had been hauled back to lay beside his brother. He was a little surprised that it appeared to have been Fingolfin who had been dragged back. I'm sorry, Fëanor snipped. It's not my fault my brother decided to stab a lightning dragon. Ulmo looked at the said brother, who appeared to be unconscious. He sighed a great, tired sigh. Lady Nerdanel, he whispered. So as not to startle her, she whirled around. Ulmo, she cried. My husband and... The Vala held up his hands. I know. In this situation, I take those uninjured to have been the most sensible, minus the one wrapped in seaweed. Let me see. Nerdanel stepped aside and Ulmo saw an angry-looking Fëanor struggling to prompt himself up on one elbow. Ulmo, you need not be concerned. I am not concerned, Ulmo replied. Once you're well, Nerdanel will likely to find the most suitable way to drive home the point that you should be with Mundus right now. But unless you are so eager to return to him, you should let me see your wounds. Fëanor let his head slam into the mud with a clunk. Fine. Do what I want. The Valar always do what you want. Ulmo almost hit him, but that altogether defeated his objective of getting the elves out of his realm as fast as possible. Instead, he knelt beside him and put a hand on his arm, softly whispering a deep song. You're a lucky son of Finwë. The spell also put you deflected almost the entirety of the charge. Now let me check your brother and his wife. End of chapter 9. Stay tuned.